Greetings. This is Randy Mayeux, your speech teacher, and this is my lecture on how to prepare a speech. I'm still learning the technology, but I believe I'm going to be able to share the screen just enough to let you know what's happening. I'm going to do a couple of things before we get to the how to prepare a speech. So let's begin with this. I talked about this yesterday, and let me find the right item. I am not seeing the right, here we go. Okay, so if you look at your screen, I have a list of graded assignments. And this is the summary, and I will put this up on Blackboard if I have not already. And the first assignment you did, and your grade for this will be a C for completed. C for completed. And that is the speech listening assignment of the Celeste Headley TED Talk. The next assignment is your first points graded assignment. It was the speech review sheet. You picked out a speech on your own, you filled out the sheet, and you sent it in, and it will be worth 100 points. And I thought I would get those grades up by now, but it will be this weekend, I suspect, and I apologize about that. So you have completed, theoretically, number 1 and number 2. Your assignment that is due next Monday, which is, let's see here, April 22nd. April 22nd, next Monday, will be your informative speech, 100 points. On that speech, listen very carefully to this. You will need to give me an outline, you will need to give me sources, and you must have 4 sources to get an A on that speech. And I'm going to talk about how to do good research in this lecture. That will be worth 100 points. And then in a few days, we'll do test 1. And this is summer session. We move very rapidly. We'll go to the persuasive speech, which will be done the same way as the informative speech, but it's a little different approach. It's a dramatically different approach. That will be 100 points. Then you'll have a final speech worth 100 points. That one is easy, no research required. I just want to see if you have learned how to put a speech together. We'll be talking about that. Then there'll be a second test for 100 points, and there will be some kind of group-related assignment. That will be another C for completed, and then there'll be a second speech listening sheet to be assigned, and that's a C for completed. And there are some extra credit possibilities. Don't forget the letter from Birmingham jail. So that is your graded assignment sheet, and you ought to keep this handy and literally put a check mark beside each one when you complete it. I would print that out and keep it with your speech folder. All right, for today, hold on here. Hold on. Okay, for today, I've got to restart the share screen, and we are going to be looking at this sheet, how to prepare a speech. This is in Blackboard, and you ought to pause now and print this out and have it handy. You will notice that it has blanks to fill out. And so you will want to fill out the blanks as we go for this lecture. This entire sheet will be on the first test. I'm going to ask you, what are the steps that you take to prepare a speech? It's an open note test. You really just have to copy the answer into the test, but that's what we're going to do. So keep this sheet handy, pause this video, grab this sheet, and then start the video after you've got the sheet in front of you. I'm going to stop the screen sharing now, and I'm going to begin the lecture. So let me clear my screen of stuff that is distracting, and I'm nearly done. And so now I'm looking into the camera and preparing to begin this lecture. How to prepare a speech. Let me remind you that all good speaking boils down to two basic elements. Have something to say, that's invention from Aristotle, and delivery, that is delivery from Aristotle. So So have something to say, invention, I've left out the phrase, and say it very well. That's delivery, and all of that is from Aristotle. Now, if you'll look at this sheet that you've got in front of you, on the right, it says all successful messages have. This is the basic of the basics. A good speech, a good article, a good book, a good movie, a good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And my experience, both from students giving speeches and from lots of years of listening to speeches and presentations, there are a lot of speakers who begin in the middle and end in the middle. They don't have a beginning and they don't have an ending. They just kind of begin without a beginning and they kind of end without an ending. So a good speech needs to have a good beginning. And the number one task of a good beginning is to get the audience to say, ooh, I want to hear this. And so you've got to have a beginning that beckons, that invites, that engages, that grabs the attention of the audience on this speech. And so that's the critical factor, is you've got to have a beginning that grabs them. And then the middle are the guts of the speech. That's the content of the speech. And then the ending is wrapping it up. And I'm going to talk about the two ways to end the speech. Now, you might wonder, Randy, when you give speeches, do you do this well? And let me just be really honest and candid. I am good at beginnings. When I give an actual speech, I almost always start with a story that gets people attention. It invites them in. I don't always do it, but I almost always do it. And I have been praised by audience members for the way I begin my presentations. I am not all that good at endings. I have not learned that. I've worked on it. It's the part of my speaking that I have difficulty with. Wrapping it up and ending well is difficult. Now, you all know the greatest beginning of all time. Once upon a time. And if you use once upon a time as the great beginning, you know how to end it. And they live happily ever after. They live happily ever after. And so once upon a time, and they lived happily ever after. Now, in modern times, there's a better beginning, and it starts like this: a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So always remember that when you are preparing and delivering your speech, work on the beginning, the middle, and the end. It is really important to do that. Now, you have to listen carefully. This lecture is on how to prepare a speech, not how to deliver a speech. And because it's on how to prepare a speech, I want you to not only follow all these steps, but I want you also to follow the steps in this order. This is the order you follow to prepare a good speech. And everything about this sheet has to do with not saying it well, but having something to say. This is getting ready to speak. And I will grade you on what I perceive to be the kind of research you did and the preparation you did. And so you want to do a good job preparing your speech. And far more importantly, later in your life, when you're giving presentations, when you're on a team at work, wherever you are, the places you have to give presentations are endless. I want you to always remember beginning, middle, and end. And I want you to remember, you might even want to save this sheet kind of forever to remember the steps to follow in preparing a speech. So work on that. Now, you prepare the speech in this order. And so I'm going to go ahead and tip you off. You basically write the middle of the speech before you ever get to the conclusion. And you write the middle of the speech and the conclusion before you get to the introduction. You write the introduction last. I'll tell you why in a minute. you write the conclusion next to last, you write the middle first. So that's the steps to take in preparing a speech. All right, there are 12 steps, and here we go. Remember to keep your pen handy and fill in the blanks as we go. Number one, you choose a topic. That's the first step, is you choose a topic. And I have given you a very lengthy exercise to help you choose a good topic. You brainstorm ideas: person, place, thing, job, career, problem, disease, contest, war, how to. You really brainstorm. You are in search of what would interest you, but would also interest your audience. And so look at these subpoints under choose a topic. Choose a topic that is manageable. It's not too big. You can't give this is a 4 to 8 minute speech assignment. You can't give a 4 to 8 minute speech on all the wars ever fought, on all the Super Bowls ever played, on all the kinds of cancer known to human beings. You can't do that. It's too big. And so you've got to find a way to narrow it down to something that is manageable for 4 to 8 minutes. Now, it can also be too small, how to tie your shoe. But what you want is something, you could give a good speech on breast cancer in 4 to 8 minutes. You could not give an exhaustive speech on breast cancer. There are plenty of things you could add to the speech, but you could give a good speech in 4 to 8 minutes on breast cancer. That's what it means to be manageable. And then it has to matter to the speaker. That's you. You are going to be researching this topic. You want to learn about this topic. You want to read more and learn more and discover more. And so you have to ask, am I interested in this topic? And then you have to ask, and this is equally as tough, will my audience care about this topic? You may really like one video game that you want to give an informative speech on, but if your audience doesn't ever play or care about video games, that's the wrong topic. Now, sometimes the audience should care and does not care. Let me give you an example. If you had given a speech in January on the danger of a global pandemic, there's a good chance that your audience would have said, I don't care about that. I bet they do now. And so sometimes you have to alert them in advance to care about something. So manageable matters to the speaker, matters to the audience. And then the fourth subpoint on this is aspirational. I have it worded, you want to help your audience aim for the better or the noble. So those are the four elements of a good topic. Let me give you an example. I am capable, I'm decent at how to research. I'm a good researcher. I know how to read and find stuff. This morning, I read a couple of major chapters in a book called Utopia for Realists about the history of universal basic income. That, by the way, would be an interesting informative speech topic. What is universal basic income? It's fascinating. So anyway, I researched that topic. I care about it. I speak on poverty and race issues, and that's a topic that really matters to me. So I enjoyed that research. I suppose I could research how to put on makeup. That'd be a how-to speech I could give. I could read a book about it. I could read some articles about it. I could watch some videos about it, and I could give a speech on how to put on makeup. I want you to know that I do not want to spend 5 seconds of my life researching how to put on makeup. So even though there may be people in my audience that want that topic, I don't want to study it. Some in the audience may not care about it either. That's not a good topic for an informative speech for a speech class. But if you have a group of people who want to learn how to put on makeup, it's a great topic. So you have to know your audience. That's why right here at the top, it says audience speaker. Right there, audience speaker. It matters to the audience, but it also matters to the speaker. Number two, after you've chosen a topic, Number two, you write a thesis statement. You boil your speech down to one sentence. And this sentence, let me read the subpoints here, make it a positive statement. Do not make it a question, and make it clear, short, and memorable. Now, your thesis sentence is not your introduction to grab their attention. In the speech delivery, it comes after that grabbing introduction. So it's not intended to gain their interest. It's intended to delineate, to describe, to state, this is what this speech is about. If you were to go to church regularly and you miss one Sunday, and you go to the restaurant and you see some people from church and you ask, what was this sermon about? They're only going to give you one sentence. That's the thesis sentence. You want the thesis sentence. Now, a quick history lesson. I told you in that earlier part one of overview and initial concepts lecture. I'm going to finish that lecture later in a few days. I told you about logos, ethos, pathos, later mythos by somebody else, but Aristotle, logos, ethos, pathos. And I want to tell you that Aristotle started as a rhetorician, and rhetoric was the domain of an oral culture. It was spoken. Many people were illiterate. They could not read and write, but they could speak. Aristotle had instructions for both educated speakers and everyday speakers who were not as educated. And I want you to know that logos, ethos, pathos, and rhetoric started for speaking, not for writing. But the English departments of our universities have stolen rhetoric and Aristotle from speech. We want him back. I'm smiling. There's actually a long and interesting history about that. But if you go to English class, they're going to tell you something about a thesis sentence that is different from a speech thesis sentence. So you have to listen to me carefully here. In a speech thesis sentence, you do not present your outline of the speech. Whereas in an English thesis sentence, you kind of include the outline of the essay. Remember, speech class, the end result is giving speeches. English class, the end result is writing essays. And so we're going to do something to give the brief outline of the speech later as part of the introduction, but the thesis sentence itself is simple. And so let me just take that subject I read about this morning. Here would be a good thesis sentence for universal basic income speech. This is worth really paying attention to, even writing it down, because this is what I want your thesis sentence to sound like. Today, I will inform you about the basics of universal basic income, period. That's it. It just says this. It's really almost a topic sentence. It's almost, this is the sentence. I will inform you about the elements of the universal basic income. That's it. That's all you want. So you write your thesis sentence, second. Now, what that thesis sentence does is it gives you an overarching reminder. Don't go off on tangents. Stick to the subject at hand. Don't put anything in your speech that does not flow from or flow into or elaborate on or reveal more fully that subject. So that's the second point. All right, number three, brainstorm your research questions. Brainstorm your research questions. Now let me talk about this a minute. If your name was Dr. Fauci, you were the premier doctor on a pandemic in the country, and you were giving a speech, you would start by brainstorming on paper, from your head to paper, stuff you already know. But he knows everything. Now, the fact is he keeps learning and he keeps studying, but he has an overflow of knowledge that has taken him a lifetime to develop. Now, if he were giving a speech on how to fly an airplane, that'd be a different deal. So what I'm getting at is, if you are already a genuine expert, you begin with brainstorming stuff you already know. But you're college students. You have not yet established your years of expertise. You have not read enough books, done enough things. You are more knowledgeable than I am on a lot of things. And I have more knowledge on some things than you do. But if you have not spent years studying, then you have to start with research questions, not what you already know. So that's why for this level, college first semester of speech, I begin with brainstorm your research questions. What are those questions? Well, you write down the stuff you need to learn about your topic. Who named brain cancer or breast cancer? When was breast cancer first discovered? Who is the doctor or scientist that first came across breast cancer and wrote about it? When did that happen? Oh, where was that doctor and that first patient living? Write these questions down right now. Who, what, where, when, how, and why. And whatever your topic is, you ask of yourself, is there a who, a what, a where, a when, a what, a how, and a why about this topic? So if you were doing a speech on the history of the computer, one of the questions you would ask is, who invented the computer? And then you would discover there's not a clear-cut answer to that. Although you can make the case that one name to be attached to that is Alan Turing, T-U-R-I-N-G. You may have heard of the Turing test. And so you want to know the who, what, where, when, how, and why. And those are the research questions you begin with. So if you were doing a speech on the Battle of Gettysburg during the Civil War, you would want to know, where was the battle? What was the date of the battle? When was it? You would want to know how it was fought, how many soldiers on each side, how many weapons they had. You would want to know the names of the generals leading the two sides. You would certainly want to know the outcome of the battle. And if you're doing a speech on the Battle of Gettysburg, you would certainly find a way to pull in the Gettysburg Address after the battle by Abraham Lincoln. If those questions sound familiar, they are the ones on that exercise sheet I gave you on the inverted pyramid. If you have not done that sheet, I think you ought to take 20 or 30 minutes and do that before you begin working on your speech, to go through the exercise of how to ask and answer those questions. Look especially in that Wikipedia article on the inverted pyramid, and look especially at that, and notice the first sentence written by the journalist after Abraham Lincoln had been shot. It's a great sentence, and it is a sentence that says, this is who was shot, when it happened, where it happened, how he was attacked, not a knife, but a gun. You don't know who shot him, and you don't know why, but you've got answers to 5 of the 6 questions. Okay, so you brainstorm your research questions. Number 4, you now research. You've not yet started research. You've come up with a list of questions. What is research? It is answering the questions you need the questions answered to. It's finding the answer to your questions. And as you read and research, you will also discover what is the next question to pursue. Now, how do you find what to read in research? I want you to listen to this very carefully, because there are a lot of people who research really badly and they don't learn. The purpose of research is learning the answers to questions so that you can talk about it intelligently, so that you can inform somebody in a speech. And so I want you to really listen to this carefully. You've got to find sources with genuine expertise. Let me give you an example. There is a man, I forget the exact number, but it's somewhere between 7 and 9 books that he has written. He's won a Pulitzer Prize. That's the Academy Awards of writing books. He's written 7 to 9 books on one person, Lyndon Baines Johnson. When you drive on LBJ Freeway, that's Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was the president of the United States after John Kennedy was assassinated. His name is Caro, C-A-R-O, and I've heard him lecture, and I've read a couple of his books, but I've not read all of them. He has spent decades writing the life of Lyndon Baines Johnson. If you gave a speech on Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, and did not read Mr. Caro's works, you've done bad research. And so here's something to write down and really get in your head. You want to find out, once you choose your topic, who is the leading expert ever on this topic. That's it. Who is the leading expert on this topic? And then you want to find a way to get to that leading expert. Maybe you know Mr. Caro, and you call him and say, I have a list of questions. Can I ask you these over the phone? In the old days, I'd say, could you knock on his door and visit with him? We're in a pandemic. If you can't call him and don't know him, and by the way, if you were to ever call an author and say, I'm a college student at Eastfield writing a speech about blank, and I've discovered you the expert, can I ask you a few questions? There's a decent chance they'll take your call and answer them. They would be flattered that a student is researching that. But if you can't reach them, then you ask, did they write a book? Did they give an interview? You want to find their words describing what it is they knew in your research. You want to get as close to the actual subject expert as possible. Obviously, the best person to interview about LBJ would be Lyndon Baines Johnson, but he's dead. And so you do read this. If you were giving a speech on Lyndon Johnson, you read his speeches, you read anything he wrote, you listen to interviews with him, and then you read his premier biography. You want to get as close to the expert who is the best expert as you can. You don't do this. You don't Google Lyndon Baines Johnson and take the first 4 Google hits and say, those are my 4 sources. Be better than that. You want to Google who is the leading expert on Lyndon Johnson. You want to find 2 or 3 people who agree with the assessment that Mr. Caro is the leading expert, and he would be, by the way. And you want to make sure that you have chosen the leading expert. Now, what I'm about to say, I'm trusting you. Don't send this video to other teachers. This is between you and me, even though it's on YouTube for the universe. I give you permission to use as a first source, not an only source, not the main source, but a first source. I give you permission to use Wikipedia. Now, why do I do that? Well, you can't go to the library. Even if you could, it turns out that Encyclopedia Britannica is not even printed anymore. And so that's a big deal. You need a kind of an overview article. And so if you were doing a speech on Lyndon Johnson, the place to start would be the Wikipedia article. Now, are there errors in Wikipedia? Yes, but it turns out that if it's not a controversial article, there are no more errors. In fact, there are fewer errors than in the old Encyclopedia Britannica. It is generally reliable, not always, but generally. Now, if you're doing an article on Donald Trump, I promise you that that article is being batted back and forth by anonymous editors who are putting in good things and bad things and false things and true things. But when you're looking at something that is not currently controversial, Wikipedia is pretty good. So I give you permission to start with Wikipedia, but do not write your speech on Wikipedia. That gives you a founding knowledge. I constantly read at least the first section of a Wikipedia article to understand the subject I don't know anything about. This morning, I looked up a name that I knew, but I didn't remember enough. So and I did that while I was reading that book. All right, so you research. Now, you've got notes. You've chosen your topic. You've researched. You've written the answers to your questions. By the way, notice here up on number 4, what is the next question to pursue? If you were able to interview Mr. Cairo on Lyndon Johnson, your last question should be this question. Mr. Cairo, what is the question I should have known to ask you and I did not know to ask you? What is the next question that I need to find the answer to? And that's the ongoing progress of research. We have already seen that demonstrated during this COVID-19 pandemic. At first, we thought it was spread this way, and now we learned it spread this way. And we keep learning about how to keep safe from it and what to do. And by the way, if you are not wearing a mask when you're in public, if you're not keeping your distance, you are being foolish and reckless, not just for you and not just for that other person, but maybe spreading it to your grandmother and grandfather. This is a serious thing. Okay. All right. Now we're going to pretend you've learned the stuff that you need to know to put in your speech. And you can look at videos or articles. Remember, you need at least 4 sources. Yes, a video would count as a source. I've had people interview an expert, and then you record it like this. Interview with Ms. Jane Garza on June 20, 2020 at 10 a.m. in the morning. So you document it that way and use it as a source. But now you've got your research done, and you are now going to begin actual work on the speech itself. You put on paper what's going to end up coming out of your mouth as your speech. And so number 5, you organize your material for your speech. Now, you have a couple of outlines in Blackboard. This is one of them, and this comes right out of a textbook. And so ultimately, your speech is going to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. This is taking all the stuff you know and organizing it into a speech outline. And what you really ought to do is, even if you write a manuscript, every word of your speech, and I am a fan of that, even if you do that, you first start with an outline. Okay, you organize your material for your speech. And in doing that, number 6, you decide on your main points. Point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. There's no magic about 3 points. You can have 2, you can have 7, you can have 83. Although if you say, and now my 67th point, people are really tuning you out long ago. There seems to be something really usable about 3 main points. In a 4 to 8 minute speech, that seems to be about right. But you can do 2, you can do more. There are historically 10 commandments. There are 7 habits of highly effective people by Stephen Covey. I read thrillers about an assassin turned good guy named Orphan X, and he has his own 10 commandments. So there's nothing magical about 3. And so you want to do what you can to come up with clear main points. So that is number 6. And then number 7, include your supporting information. Stories, illustrations, facts, statistics, subpoints. And so you're giving a speech on, this is not when the pandemic is around, enjoying the sports in Dallas. Point number one, you can enjoy professional sports. Subpoint, the Dallas Cowboys. Subpoint, the Texas Rangers. Subpoint, the Frisco, whatever their soccer team is. I don't follow soccer. Subpoint, the Dallas Stars. Subpoint, the WNBA team that we have. And so the main point is enjoy the professional sports of Dallas. And now here are the subpoints. Those are what subpoints are. And on this outline, do not worry about A, B, 1, 2, 1, 2, A, B. Just I want main point with subpoints, and you can number them or letter them or bullet point them. I don't care. All right. Number 8. This is big. This takes your speech from an okay speech to a much better speech, a potentially really good speech. Write this down. Let me describe it. Number 8, rewrite your main points in parallel form. You get extra credit for alliteration. You don't really get extra credit. Rewrite your main points in parallel form. You want your main point sentences to sound exactly the same with a different point. And so, let me just give you a description. Lyndon Baines Johnson in his early life. Lyndon Baines Johnson in his middle years. Lyndon Baines Johnson as President of the United States. Lyndon Baines Johnson in his last years. You want to, I know you think you're saying it too often, but you want to say Lyndon Baines Johnson in each main point sentence. Why? Because that will help the people understand, oh, this is a speech about Lyndon Baines Johnson. That's important. You want to repeat the key phrase. Now, if we were in class, in an hour-and-a-half class, I would show you some speeches. Let me mention them. In the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr., you already know the most famous line, I have a dream that one day, I have a dream that one day, I have a dream that one day, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day, I have a dream that one day. But he also said, let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring. I think it's 9 times on Let Freedom Ring. And he said, 100 years later, 100 years later, 100 years later. He repeated his key phrase over and over and over again so that people got it. Repetition in speaking, maybe not in English class in an essay, but repetition in speaking is good to overdo because you're not overdoing. In the speech, and you can find this on AmericanRhetoric.com, by Hillary Clinton in Beijing in the mid-1990s, she said, it is a violation of human rights when, and then she describes the way girls or women have been abused and treated and killed, and she used that phrase 7 times. It is a violation of human rights when. It is a violation of human rights when. It is a violation of human rights when. 7 times. I really want you to write your main point sentences in parallel form. Put like 3 or 4 stars beside this. This is good. It makes the difference. All right. Number 9, notice we're near the end. Write your conclusion. In your conclusion, you review your main points. Today I told you about this and this and this. You don't have to use the full sentence or the full wording, but a quick review. Then for an informative speech, you use, circle this phrase, a wrap-up sentence. A wrap-up sentence. And that is my brief overview of the life and times of Lyndon Baines Johnson. A wrap-up sentence. You've got to have a sentence that when you finish the sentence, the audience thinks the speech is over. You've got to end the sentence with a good sentence. Now, when we get to the persuasive speech, notice this one, you might want to circle it. That one's a call to action. And so therefore, I encourage you to go watch the Dallas Cowboys on your next trip to Dallas, assuming that we ever have live games again. And so a call to action for persuasive, you're trying to, I'm getting ahead of myself, trying to get them to do something to change their mind, attitude, or behavior, whereas informative, you're just giving them information. Never include new material in the conclusion. Number 10, write your introduction. This is practically the last thing you do. And let me read these and then make my point. You want to hook your listeners, touch the mind and the heart to get them interested. And then you want to state your thesis. This is what I'm speaking about. Then you want to preview your main points. And then you want to tell the audience, put a star beside this, why you care about this and maybe why they should care about this. This is important because, I mean, you know, if you were giving a speech in early January about the danger of a someday coming global pandemic, you would say at the end, this is important because someday a pandemic could hit here. If it did, wouldn't it be better to be ready in advance? Well, boy, we needed a bunch of people giving that speech in January. All right. Now, the most critical factor in the introduction is that opening sentence. Those opening words hook your audience's attention. Get their attention. That's critical. Hook their attention. And then you state your thesis. Today I will be informing you about the life and times of Lyndon Baines Johnson, former president of the United States. I'm drawing a blank on the number that he is, but you would name the such and such president of the United States. Number 11, write your transitions. Now, if you will look again at this sheet, it says in between each major section, transition into next main point. A transition sentence, Google the phrase sample transitions. When you finish a point, you want to have a sentence that says, okay, I'm through with that point and I'm going to the next point. And so after that, the next thing was, and then we did, and then he lived. And you want to find a phrase that lets your audience know, I finished that point, I'm going to that point. That's a transition. And then last of all, number 12, you'll notice the two columns, practice, 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 keep practicing, and rehearse, 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 keep rehearsing. Let me tell you the difference. I played tennis in high school and college. Competitively was ranked in the state in tennis, had scholarship. It was good. All right. I would have been better. I was good, but I would have been better if I had been a better practice player, hitting backhands down the line, hitting backhands cross court by the box full. That's practice. So when you're speaking, pick a favorite poem, pick a favorite song lyric, and read it aloud. And when we get to how to deliver a speech, I'll give you hints on that. So read it aloud, emphasizing words, pronunciation. That's practicing speaking. But then, when you have finished preparing your speech and your outline is finished, maybe a manuscript, you want to actually give your speech 6 times before you record it and send it to me and you do it in front of others. That's rehearsing your speech. Okay, that's how to prepare a speech. Choose a topic, write a thesis sentence, brainstorm your research questions, organize your material for your speech, decide on your main points, include your supporting information, rewrite your main points in parallel form, write your conclusion, write your introduction, write your transitions, practice speaking, but rehearse your speech. That's how to prepare a speech. Do it in this order, and you will have something to say. Now, let me show you. I'm going to share the screen again here. Let me get it ready. I think I'm ready. Hold on. Sorry to make you wait. I'm literally wasting your time. I know, hold on, I'll pause the record. Okay, I think you can see this. I have put this up in Blackboard. It says informative speech outline, and just notice what it does here. Introduction, main point number 1, make the points parallel, supporting, didn't mean to do that, okay. Main point number 2, main point number 3, conclusion, and remember up here, it says, remember to include transitions between each segment. And I should have had down here, I'll make this change for my next class, call to action is persuasive. I need the phrase wrap up for informative. So that's the informative speech outline kind of template, and you've got that in Blackboard. What you can do is you can work on your speech, begin writing it by hand. I would like you, if at all possible, to type your final outline. But that sheet is to let you have a worksheet to work on your outline. Now, your job right now is to research your speech, to prepare having something to say. Today is Tuesday. Either tomorrow or Thursday, it may be Thursday, I will put up the lecture on how to deliver a speech. I hope you found this useful. I know that I've already hinted at this. Speech is a required class for most degree programs. Why is that? Because every job requires good communication skills, and having something to say and saying it very well is exactly what you need to develop. Good luck in preparing your speech.